On his 5th birthday, a young boy collapsed. He was plunged into a nightmare, a vision of a man, beaten and bloodied, kneeling before an executioner who held a sword aloft, ready to strike. A cadre of uniformed women watched the grim scene unfold. The executioner's gaze was cold and unwavering, while the condemned man trembled, his face a mask of terror, blood, and tears. With a swift, brutal motion, the sword descended, severing the man's head from his shoulders as the onlookers remained perfectly still. As the boy lay in his bed, the nightmare gave way to a shocking realization. This wasn't just a bad dream. It was the world of a game he knew intimately. And the villain who was just killed in that scene was him. He sat bolt upright, clutching his throat, the terror of his future fate washing over him. He remembered everything about the game he once loved. It was a fantasy world of love and war made for adults. The protagonist was a man known as the Sword Emperor, destined to be the strongest swordsman, who at this point in the story was simply enjoying his life at an academy. The story followed this protagonist as he fell in love and trained alongside his companions, all of them growing stronger together. Their ultimate goal was to thwart a coup d'etat being plotted by an evil duke and his family, eventually defeating them. The horrifying truth settled in. He was Luke Hagato Disgustos, the 5-year-old second son of that very duke. He also recalled that in the game, this character, Luke, was burdened with a truly terrible nickname. The nickname was the Gross, Fat Toad, a mockery of his awful appearance and personality. He remembered how the game's Luke grew up to be a petty tyrant, abusing his family's authority to torment the protagonist and his allies. The memory of the game's more adult scenes, which he couldn't handle even then, made him shudder. He recalled the tragic history of the character he now inhabited. Luke Disgustos' horrible personality was attributed to his mother's death during his birth and the subsequent neglect from his entire family. Lacking any innate magical talent, he developed a profound inferiority complex. In a desperate bid for recognition, he committed evil deeds, only to be used as a sacrificial pawn by the Duke and ultimately executed. His role in the grand scheme was insignificant. He wasn't even a major obstacle. His sole purpose in the story was to be killed. The realization struck him with visceral horror. He pictured the grotesque man he was destined to become, understanding that this transformation would happen in just 10 years, when both he and the protagonist were fated to be 15. He clutched his pillow, a spark of defiance igniting within him. He reasoned that if he could stop himself from becoming that monstrous version of himself and avoided committing any evil acts, he might be able to change his fate. He didn't want to die. Bolstered by the memories of his previous life, he felt he no longer needed the love of a family that would never give it. A brief fantasy of a peaceful future played out in his mind. As a noble, he could live comfortably without worry. But the thought was fleeting. He quickly dismissed the idea, realizing a flaw in his plan. He remembered a critical detail. He couldn't change the fact that his family was evil. A purge was coming for them, and he would be caught in it regardless of his own actions. To survive, he would need enough power to defend himself. His gaze fell upon his small hands. Despite the character's history of failure, he recalled a key piece of information. Luke Disgustos was supposed to have a talent for magic. Concentrating, he felt a strange, ethereal energy flowing within him. This had to be mana. The question then became how to wield it. In the game, there was a user interface, but here in reality, he had no such guide. An idea formed. Perhaps it was as simple as a chant. Focusing his intent, he clasped his hands to his chest and uttered the word heal. A gentle, sparkling light enveloped his body in response. The light faded, leaving him to wonder if the spell had been successful. Without a health bar to confirm the results, he couldn't be certain. Still, as he sat up, he had to admit he felt a little better. He continued to practice through the night, chanting the incantation repeatedly, pushing to improve his newfound skill. The spell casting went on until his voice trailed off, and he fell silent. The next morning, a gentle voice cut through his slumber. His personal maid was waking him, asking how he felt. He felt a lingering sluggishness, but noted the absence of his usual illness. The truth dawned on him. He had exhausted his mana and passed out. From this, he estimated his reserves were only sufficient for about 10 castings of the spell. As his maid checked his forehead, confirming he still seemed unwell, he understood that self-practice was not enough. To truly grasp magic, he needed to study it properly, ideally with a teacher to guide him. He quickly dismissed the thought, certain his father would never agree to hire a magic tutor. The only path forward was self-study. He called to his exclusive maid, a 12-year-old dog beastman named Syrup, and requested she bring him a book. When she returned with a tome titled Magic Fundamentals, she expressed surprise, questioning if he truly wanted such a difficult text. He was firm, stating his desire to learn how to use magic. He then changed his approach, putting on his most earnest and pleading expression. "Pretty please, Syrup?" he asked. The display of vulnerability was unexpectedly effective, striking the maid with surprising force. Emboldened, he rested his head in her lap, declaring that she was the only one he could truly rely on. He then added another request, for her to teach him how to read and do math. Caught off guard by his forwardness, Syrup could only remark that he was indeed a boy after all. Her initial surprise quickly melted into enthusiastic resolve. With a bright, determined smile, she held the book aloft and declared that he could count on her. Her energy was now boundless. Citing the typical traits of dog beastmen, she suggested they seize the opportunity to begin physical training as well. From his comfortable position in her lap, he gave a simple, blunt refusal. And so, despite his aversion to exercise, his tutelage under Syrup began. She immediately delved into the text, her expression serious as she absorbed the first lesson. She begins his lessons, reading from the book Magic Fundamentals while he rests his head on her lap. Luke expresses his amazement that she can read such long, difficult words, and she reassures him that he's doing fine. However, when it comes to explaining the difference between attributeless and attribute magic, she falters, struggling to find the right words. Despite her hesitation, Luke grasps the core concept. He realizes that the soul-like energy he perceives in the air is mana, a transparent force whose power and volume are dictated by one's innate talent. This confirms his suspicion. He truly does have a gift for magic. He reflects on his previous success, understanding now that he was able to cast heal simply by imagining his mana mending his wounds. The fundamentals are clear. A spell is cast by visualizing an outcome and directing one's mana to achieve it. The text further elaborates on the two types of magic. Attributeless magic is a basic form accessible to anyone, while the more powerful attributed magic requires a special, inherent talent, a talent that most nobles are said to possess. As drowsiness overtakes him, he considers his own lineage. The Disgusto's family is known for its excellence, and he wonders if that heritage means he, too, might one day wield attribute magic. His studies finally exhaust him, and he drifts off to sleep. Syrup gently carries him to his bed, placing the book of Magic Fundamentals beside him. With a soft smile, she carefully pulls the covers over him, ensuring he is comfortable. For a moment, she remains by his side, her expression a mixture of fondness and concern as she watches him sleep. A year passes. Luke, now more mature in his appearance, reflects on his progress. He recalls the difficult beginning, when he would constantly faint from mana exhaustion. Through this grueling process, however, he learned that he could increase his total mana capacity, the amount of magical energy stored in his body, by depleting it every single day. He taught himself to read and began studying voraciously, determined to change his grim future. Still, he feels a pang of frustration, having been unable to find a proper magic tutor. The staff in the annex, consisting of only a head butler and 3 maids, can only teach him so much. He recalled the state of his body as depicted in the game, riddled with acne, blemishes, warts, and cracked skin, all compounded by obesity. It was clear there was significant room for improvement, and he resolved that his first priority must be to take care of his health. His efforts began with simple hygiene. As he washed his face, he was amazed by the sensation of bubbles clinging to his hands, a simple phenomenon that led him to a startling realization. People in this world did not seem to practice daily bathing or washing. This new habit drew the attention of Syrup, who watched him with curiosity and asked why the water was so foamy. Luke explained that he had delicate skin and needed to wash it gently, a statement that visibly surprised her. She reacted with a shout of disbelief, questioning how he could possibly have delicate skin. He knew she couldn't understand without seeing the future he was trying to prevent, so he simply dismissed her concern, telling her it wasn't a problem for now. From that day on, the two of them established a skincare routine they performed twice a day. Syrup declared that, as his personal maid, it was only natural that she learn his routine and follow it with him. This new focus on self-care extended to his bathing, which he now practiced alongside his magic training. He dreamed of a future where he would be wealthy enough to afford high-class products like soap, lotions, moisturizer, and sunscreen without concern for the cost. While he bathed, Syrup observed from the veranda, expressing her gladness that he was learning to care for himself. She assured him that in a year's time, his skin would be completely smooth, and that if he kept it up, he would grow into a beauty. For his part, Luke was still getting used to the very idea of washing his body so thoroughly. Her prediction began to come true, as his appearance improved noticeably. Syrup remarked that he looked much healthier, though she could tell he had many things on his mind. He recalled a significant change he had recently made, informing his father that he and Syrup would now cook for themselves. He had made this decision because he always felt awful after eating the meals provided by the staff, a sickness he had to repeatedly soothe with healing magic. The results of his new diet were immediate. Enjoying a delicious meal he had prepared himself, he realized that the food of this world simply didn't agree with his constitution. His health improved as soon as he started cooking for himself, proving there was nothing inherently wrong with his digestive system. Syrup also noted that he had stopped sleeping in late every morning. This was part of his new, fixed routine. He now started his day early, making sure to go outside into the forest near the annex to get some sun. He has also started taking walks and doing some light exercise, stretching his newly agile body. Syrup cheers, delighted that he can finally go outside now. While he soaks in a bath later, Syrup suggests that he could start training. He immediately dismisses the idea, explaining to her that he dislikes exercise so much that it's completely out of the question. She asks if he doesn't want a healthy and easygoing life. With a serious expression, he confirms that a healthy, easygoing life is precisely his goal. Syrup presses the point, questioning how an easy life is possible if he only eats and sleeps, warning that he would quickly become something terrible. He agrees, acknowledging that such a lifestyle would indeed make an easy life difficult to maintain. As she relaxes in the water herself, she muses on how cute he is now, finding it hard to imagine how he became so unhealthy. She considers his potential to grow into a handsome man. He continues his explanation, adding that an easygoing life would also leave him with a terrible amount of free time. Syrup questions this, pointing out that as a noble, he is entitled to leisure. He counters that constant leisure ceases to be enjoyable, explaining that even daily trips to an amusement park or casino would quickly lose their appeal. His thoughts turn darker as he reflects on his reality. Though born a noble, he knows there is no safety net for him. Judging by his father's treatment, he is certain he will eventually be sacrificed or abandoned. He recalls his older self, a person who misused his privileged upbringing and brought about his own ruin. He resolves to make the most of his current circumstances and prepare for the future. His plan is to leverage his privileged childhood to avoid any unnecessary hardships. Ideally, he will find a wife to support him in the future. Failing that, he resolves to find a source of income that will allow him to live comfortably on his own. He considered the structure of the world he now inhabited, a world split into two major arcs. One choice that could drastically alter his path was to avoid the Alessida's Royal Academy. After all, the character of Luke was meant to appear primarily during that part of the story. The first path was the War arc, a grim tale of resolving an incident instigated by the villain. The second was the Academy arc, a lighter story focused on romance and training. He understood that mastering both of these was his ticket to securing the future he desired. A cold sweat beaded on his brow. Logically, avoiding the Academy would greatly increase his chances of survival. And yet, he had a compelling reason to attend. The reason was them, the characters of the game. A montage of their faces and adventures filled his mind, and a soft, genuine smile touched his lips. He loved them. Gazing out at the sprawling city, his resolve hardened. He would enjoy this world as Luke. He was determined to become a happy slacker. Syrup summarized his ambitions succinctly. He wanted to live an easygoing, healthy life. To that end, she insisted he must learn swordsmanship. Luke, however, preferred to move as little as possible, though he noted her own clear enthusiasm for the blade. She pressed on, arguing it was not only for his protection, but could also be enjoyable. He calmly pointed out that he didn't need to learn when he had her to protect him. Surprised, Syrup asked how he knew she was training in swordsmanship. He simply replied that he had a feeling. A bright smile spread across her face. She happily accepted the responsibility, telling him to leave all the sword fighting to her. With a simple okay, he agreed. As she departed for the night, she wished him well. The next morning, despite refusing every offer Syrup made to exercise, he knew he couldn't be completely sedentary if he wanted to stay healthy. That was why, as he ran across the estate grounds, he prepared to use a new spell he had invented. He held his hands out, palms facing each other as magical energy began to coalesce between them. Come on out, he commanded, beginning the incantation. He completes the spell, bringing forth a smiling, gelatinous creature. He has named it Val, a creation of his own original, attributeless magic. He designed the spell with a specific purpose in mind. It can function even while he is asleep. To comprehend how Val works, he reflects, one must first grasp the fundamentals of attributeless magic. This basic magic, which simply transforms mana into different forms, can be broadly classified into 5 major categories. He considers the first 2 types. Daily life magic covers simple, practical tasks like creating light or cleaning. Spells he surmises are widely used due to the world's infrequent bathing habits. Then there is strength magic, which uses mana to temporarily boost physical attributes. The effectiveness of this magic depends heavily on the user's own physical condition. It drains endurance in exchange for power. The third category is enchantment magic, a specialized school that imbues weapons with attributes. It is a form of buff magic primarily used by smiths and enchanters, and he concedes that he has no knowledge of how to perform it. Next, he considers support magic, which buffs or debuffs others by enveloping them in mana. Its power is dictated by the caster's imagination. The final category is restoration magic, which precisely stimulates the body to heal. He feels confident in this area, thanks to the medical education he received in his past life. He concludes his review by noting that all these schools of magic rely on the core principle of transforming mana. It was this very principle that he used to create Val, a unique, self-sufficient spell. Putting his creation to the test, he finds it remarkably easy to use. With a simple command, Val, fetch me that water, the creature obediently floats over and collects the liquid. The creature returns with the water, and he offers it a word of thanks. Now, he declares the real test begins. Resting his head on the table, he entrusts everything to his new creation. His true purpose for Val is revealed as he sleeps soundly at his desk. He had ordered it to envelop his body while he rested, and the creature has followed the command perfectly. He had conceived of the perfect plan to exercise his body without actually exercising himself. As his magical creation forced his limbs through a strenuous workout, his mind remained detached, observing the process with grim satisfaction. His logic was simple. If he could exercise while unconscious, it would be a piece of cake. Standing beside the gelatinous creature, Val, he confirmed that this was indeed the solution he had sought. The creature's ability to move on its own was a wonderful development. With this, he could now train while maintaining his preferred, easygoing lifestyle. Later, After his automated workout was complete, he rested on a couch, a thoughtful expression settling on his face. He lay surrounded by stacks of books, acknowledging that while everything was going well, there was still so much to do. He also braced himself for the muscle aches he would surely feel the next day. A sudden pang of hunger interrupted his thoughts. It was only afternoon, but the exercise had clearly taken its toll. Besides, he was still a growing boy. Just then, Syrup arrived with a dessert. Luke decided that too much moderation was also a bad thing. After all, he was working towards the life of a lazy, villainous noble. With a contented smile, he savored the sweet treat. 5 years have passed. In a grand library, an 11-year-old Luke sits engrossed in a book, while a 17-year-old Syrup stands watchfully nearby. She approaches him with a sly smile, calling his name to get his attention. Still focused on his reading, he calmly asks what she wants. Suddenly, the large chair he's sitting in lifts off the ground, hovering in midair. Syrup stares in shock, demanding to know how he is floating. Luke muses internally that carrying himself is no different from carrying a glass, but decides it would be a pain to explain to Syrup, who is poor with magic. He chooses to dodge the question, instead asking if she would like a ride. Her shock gives way to curiosity, and she timidly asks if she can. He confirms that, of course, she can. As she nervously approaches the floating chair, he tells her not to be scared, explaining that he is using his mana to properly support it. Reassured, she agrees. The moment she sits down, her expression shifts to one of flustered amazement at the unique and comfortable sensation. She exclaims that she's never felt anything so comfortable before, which pleases him. Having gathered her thoughts, she raises her hand to ask another question. He permits it, and she asks how his body is so well trained when she has only ever seen him reading, sleeping, or taking walks. He acknowledges that her confusion is understandable, given what she's observed. To answer, he stands before her and explains that he first bunches his mana and solidifies it. He demonstrates by creating a complex, glowing orb in his hand. Just watch, he says as Syrup looks on, her eyes wide with focus. A powerful aura erupts from his body. It is revealed that over the past 5 years, his VL has evolved a great deal, along with his comprehension of it. He then demonstrated another facet of his training. In the expansive courtyard, he moved through a series of swift, precise martial arts forms as Syrup watched from the doorway. His body became a blur of motion, a high kick followed by a powerful block and a sharp punch. The display of martial prowess left Syrup utterly astonished, her eyes wide with wonder. She watched in disbelief, questioning what she was seeing. She remembered him always saying how much he disliked strenuous activity. Despite her confusion, she continued to watch as he completed his routine, coming to a halt with a final, focused punch. His expression was one of intense concentration. He let out a quiet breath, a faint blush on his cheeks from the effort. She immediately praised his performance, declaring it amazing. Turning to face her, he asked for her honest opinion. Syrup elaborated, expressing her surprise at how hard he must have worked. She told him his movements were those of a master, beyond anything she had ever witnessed, even from seasoned martial artists. He then revealed the secret behind his skill, a new spell he had invented called Trace. He explained that it allows him to absorb VL into his body, transferring its memories directly into his brain. This ability, he continued, allows him to perfectly recreate the movements of his favorite martial arts masters. Even if he himself has forgotten the exact details, VL can retrieve them, and can even mix in techniques from his favorite fighting games and manga. And so, he concluded, all the knowledge he had absorbed, every fighting style and its history, had been combined and synthesized into his own unique martial art. He explains to Syrup that while his floating spell is impressive, he has invented another. He's been working hard to train his body, gaining muscle memory and strength, even if he isn't fully conscious of his own movements. Syrup stares, her eyes wide with shock. She declares him a genius, a claim he quietly denies. She continues to marvel at his progress, thinking to herself that her 11-year-old master has already glimpsed the mysterious abyss of magic. When Luke admits he doesn't understand what she means, Syrup simply smiles, telling him it just means he had a hard time grasping it. Later, standing on a balcony, Luke mentions he's tired from the workout and asks if Syrup wants him to prepare a change of clothes. Internally, he reflects that his advanced knowledge comes from his previous life, though he still doesn't fully understand its mechanics. His fatigue leads them to a spring in the forest. He announces his intention to take a short bath, and Syrup, carrying a basket, agrees to join him. Once in the cool water, Luke realizes it's their closest bathing spot. His thoughts drift to Syrup, recalling that the other maids have been gossiping about how beautiful she has recently become. He reflects on the beauty regimen and swordsmanship training he provided her over the last 5 years, noting that her fierceness has been polished and her beauty has reached a new level. He calls her name, and her immediate, eager response makes him think that seeing this cute, loyal side of her is his own special privilege. After their respite, they return indoors. Now dressed in a hooded robe, Luke gives Syrup a task, to inform his father that he wants his magic attribute to be determined. She accepts without hesitation. With the request made, he settles back into a plush chair, looking forward to the event as Syrup bows and departs. As she leaves, his mind turns to the fundamental principles of this world's power. Attribute magic, the innate ability one is born with, is known here as the power determined by God. He considered how one's innate magic is determined. It's a simple matter of being told what your attribute is, but he wondered who, exactly, would be the one to tell him. That responsibility falls to the Ministry of Magic of Alessitas, an institution that manages all attribute spells in the kingdom and is composed of only the world's greatest sorcerers. Relaxing in his room, he felt confident. Someone from that elite group would come to inform him of his attribute, a privilege of nobility. While he knew some people are born without attributes, he didn't believe he had to worry about that. After all, the Disgustos family has always possessed especially excellent attributes. He recalled his father's sand attribute, his older brother's iron, his older sister's seduction, and even his stepmother's rock. With such a powerful lineage, he couldn't help but wonder what his own attribute would be. The anticipation was palpable. He simply couldn't wait. The very next day, he burst out of a room while riding a floating cushion, only to be caught by an unfamiliar man who had been standing just outside the door. The man, a sharp-looking official in a dark coat, commented on the beautiful girl riding the cushion. Luke was stunned by the man's assumption. He had put effort into his appearance, but he wondered if he really looked cute enough to be mistaken for a girl. As he processed the man's words, Syrup stepped forward to make the introduction. This was Malsa Glicko, the chief of the Ministry of Magic's Attribute Bureau. The chief's gaze shifted from Syrup to the person on the cushion. He paused, adjusting his glasses as a silent understanding seemed to dawn on him. Now facing Luke, who sat properly on the cushion with Syrup beside him, the official finally spoke, addressing him incorrectly. Young lady. He complimented the maid on her splendid memory, impressed that she had memorized his entire title after hearing it only once. He mused that such perfection was to be expected of a servant in the esteemed Disgusto's household. Following his praise, he peered past her into the room and asked where he could find the young master of the Disgusto's family. Syrup simply replied that it was only natural, gesturing toward a small boy sitting on a large armchair. The boy Luke watched the exchange, wondering why the official had just praised the maid. Syrup, noticing the official's confusion, formally introduced him. This is Luke Hugelo Disgusto-sama. Malsa Glicko reflected on his own surprise. He had expected Syrup, a beast man, to be berated, and he had been prepared to intervene. This was due to the pervasive doctrine of the state church, civil man supremacy, which teaches that all non-humans, beastmen, demi-humans, spirits, and demons, are to be scorned. Luke, sensing the man's character, concluded he wasn't a bad person after all. He approached and greeted him informally as Malsan. The official, slightly taken aback, corrected him, reintroducing himself as Malsa Glicko. He then extended his hand for a handshake, asking to simply be called Luke. Malsa looked down at the small hand offered to him, his expression softening. The official accepted the gesture, shaking the boy's hand and replying, likewise. With formalities concluded, Malsa announced it was time to check Luke's magic attribute. He instructed the boy to close his eyes. As Luke complied, Malsa took a steadying breath, a hint of nervousness on his face. He produced a small, pointed instrument that began to glow. Holding it forward, he prepared to begin the determination. The result was immediate and clear. Luke's attributes were sleep and sloth. He recalls the moment Malsa Glicko spoke the names of his attributes. In that instant, he feels the attributes manifest within him, though it feels less like a discovery and more like a confirmation of something he had always known. A sense of wonder washes over him as he whispers, amazing. Malsa Glicko offers to explain further, but Luke interjects, stating that he suddenly understands the kind of magic he can use just from hearing the names of the attributes. The official continues, clarifying that among all attribute magic, there exist unique ones known as rare magic. He confirms that both of Luke's attributes, sleep and sloth, would be classified as such. He explains that while most attributes are publicly recorded, it is customary to keep rare magic a secret. He proposes officially registering Luke's abilities under the vague description of magic that influences the human body, and Luke agrees. Luke admits that only simple applications of his powers come to mind and asks if there are other ways to utilize them. Malsa advises that everyone has spells they're naturally suited for, and that improvement comes from researching one's own attributes. He raises a finger, emphasizing that finding magic suitable for oneself is the only true path to mastery. Luke quietly considers the man's words. The boy promises to keep the advice in mind as he begins his training. Malsa, however, appears quite surprised by this response. The official's surprise turns to shock. He demands to know how Luke could possibly know about appraisal magic, a concept the boy had just claimed to be unaware of. Luke calmly questions him back, asking if appraising his attributes wasn't exactly what Malsa had just done. He then reveals the source of his knowledge. As a reincarnator, he simply figured such a thing existed, but was unaware it was supposed to be a secret. He calmly instructs Syrup to bring their guests some tea, completely ignoring Malsa Glicko's flustered, stammering reaction to the recent revelation. As Syrup serves them, Malsa takes a sip, his composure slowly returning. He closes his eyes and remarks that the tea is delicious. He asks about its name, and Luke explains it's a personally recommended herbal tea that's good for the body. Syrup adds that she grew it herself, making it unavailable for purchase. Malsa notes that it has effectively cleared his head. Smiling, he thanks Luke for his understanding and offers to give him some of the tea leaves. He then seeks confirmation, assuming he should keep the matter of appraisal magic a secret. He mentions that his own daughter, who is about Luke's age and fond of magic, would surely like the tea. Luke seems surprised to learn that Malsa has a daughter. The mention of magic suddenly shifts his focus. Malsa leans forward intently, asking about the flying cushion Luke had used earlier, stating with certainty that it was no average spell. Luke simply smiles and dismisses the inquiry, saying it's fine. Realizing his own forwardness, Malsa apologizes for his outburst. With Syrup holding a small, gelatinous creature, Luke gestures towards it and suggests to Malsa that they have a chat. As the sun sets over the distant mountains, their long conversation comes to an end. Later, as Malsa prepares to leave, he thanks Luke for his time. But Luke stops him with a surprising question. He asks if Malsa would be his tutor. In response to his request, Malsa Glicko covers his mouth, momentarily taken aback. He questions the boy's need for a magic tutor, stating that he personally doesn't think Luke requires one and asks what exactly he is hoping to learn. He clarifies his modest proposal. He simply wants Malsa to answer any letters he sends with questions about magic he doesn't understand. In essence, he is asking him to be pen pals. The man's expression softens into a smile. He finds the idea interesting. Sensing an agreement, the boy eagerly asks if that means yes. Malsa counters with a condition of his own, asking if Luke would mind if he also asked him some questions from time to time. He agrees immediately, though he admits with a touch of humility that he isn't sure he'd be able to answer any of them. With that, Malsa smiles and declares that they have a deal. With the terms settled, they exchange bright smiles. Luke offers a heartfelt thanks, and Malsa confirms that he would be happy to write with him. And so, their correspondence began. Sometime later, Luke sits comfortably reading a letter, reflecting on how he gained a tutor in Malsan and, as a result, became quite knowledgeable about magic. Through his studies, he came to understand a key distinction. Unlike attributeless magic, where mana can be freely transformed according to imagination, attributed spells must follow certain rules depending on their attribute. It was his appraisal magic that allowed him to realize his own inherent magic. He learned that inherent magic is the term for the basic spells of an attribute. For the fire attribute, for example, these are Pilot Light, Fireball, and Fire Arrow. Anything beyond these basics is entirely up to the user's own knowledge and practice. Pondering this, he considers his own attribute, Sleep, which also possesses 3 inherent magic spells. The first is simply Sleep, a spell that can put a target to sleep. Its effect can be fine-tuned, varying based on the amount of mana injected and the target's own resistance. He continued his analysis, deducing the final 2 inherent spells of his attribute. The second must be Sleep Timer, a spell to define a period of sleep through touch, ensuring the target would not wake for the designated time no matter what happened. The third, he reasoned, would be Sleep Delete, an ability to forcefully dispel any sleep magic. With these abilities, he realized he could put people to sleep before they even understood what was happening. If he combined it with his Sloth attribute, his targets would be utterly oblivious. However, he knew there was a catch. Magic could be defended against through inherent resistance and defensive spells. This limitation sparked an idea. If a fire attribute user could create a fire arrow, then perhaps he could create a sleep arrow to put people to sleep from a distance. The thought brought a confident smile to his face. Both of his attributes were so amazing, they felt like cheating the system. He looked down at the open book and the letter from his new tutor, his mind racing with possibilities. He could put a teacher to sleep to skip class whenever he wanted. There was simply no end to the different spells he wanted to experiment with. A lifetime wouldn't be enough to test them all. Luke Disgustos has cultivated a new habit. Every morning, he cedes control of his body to Val. He finds the practice clears his head, allowing him to better focus on his magical experiments. After his regimen, Syrup approaches and asks if he would like a meal. He enthusiastically accepts her offer. He reflects on their arrangement. While Syrup is a flawless maid in every other respect, he still prefers to cook for himself, drawing on memories of dishes from his past life. They take turns preparing meals. The reason for this is simple. While her meals are perfectly edible, they completely lack any attention to detail. Now 11 years old, Luke decides to wash the sweat from his training while she cooks. He can feel his worries growing with each passing year, but pushes them aside to be dealt with later. He heads to the closest water source, a secluded natural spring. As he begins to bathe, the faint sound of voices catches his ear. The voice is filled with despair, a young girl sobbing that she's about to die all alone. He is puzzled, as this secluded spot is rarely visited by anyone. Peering into the surrounding woods, he spots the source of the sound. He considers that the area isn't particularly dangerous and wonders if she is simply a lost child. "Who are you?" he calls out. His voice startles her, and she lets out a small gasp. As he steps closer, he realizes she is not alone. Suddenly, the clearing is filled with a strange, repetitive sound. The girl stares at the half-dressed Luke, her face flushed and her hands covering her mouth in shock, while he looks on with a flat, unamused expression. He deduced that the girl must be a guest for one of his sister's tea parties, an event he had completely forgotten about. The girl, meanwhile, was utterly flustered, her eyes swirling as she stammered in shock. To ease her panic, he introduced himself with a smile as Luke Hugolo Disgustos. The girl let out a small shriek before her expression brightened with recognition, asking if he was the younger brother of her esteemed Iris. She then formally, if clumsily, introduced herself as Karen C. Caribbean, the 12-year-old daughter of Count Caribbean. Luke watched her with a gentle smile, finding her earnestness amusing and addressing her familiarly as Karen One-Isan. Her formality suddenly vanished, replaced by wide-eyed curiosity. She knelt before him, asking if he could use attribute magic. As she spoke, her face lit up with pure awe. He confirmed that he could, adding that he was quite fond of magic. Taking her hand to help her up, He turned the question back on her, asking if she would show him her own attribute magic. Her response was immediate and full of zeal. "Yes, right away, sir," she declared. Her professional eagerness prompted him to ask if she worked for a shop of some kind. With a polite "Pardon me," she began. A small, ornate pouch materialized in a flash of light. From it, she produced a surprising array of cooking supplies, remarking that her magic was simply the pouch and the items themselves could be purchased anywhere. He was quite curious about her magic pouch, which seemed capable of storing a great deal. He expressed his desire to see her attribute magic, but then gently suggested that perhaps she should put on some clothes first. In response, she began to cook. The sound of sizzling oil filled the clearing as she expertly handled a pan and stirred a large pot. Her attribute magic was simply cooking. Moments later, she presented him with a steaming bowl of spiced moon rabbit soup. She explained that it was just something she'd made with the ingredients she had, and warmly invited him to enjoy. He wondered what made food cooked with attribute magic so different. As he brought the spoon to his lips, a delicious aroma filled his senses. The moment the soup touched his tongue, an explosion of flavor overwhelmed him. It was unbelievably delicious, better than anything he had ever tasted, even in his past life. The shock was so intense, he felt himself momentarily lift from his seat. He felt a surge of power welling up inside him. The food provided a beneficial status condition, a buff. He looked down in surprise to see the bowl was already empty. The realization struck him. A young, noble lady capable of creating dishes that enhanced one's abilities. His gaze fixed on Karen with a newfound intensity. He decided then and there that she was the greatest possible asset to support the slothful life he aimed for. He would not let her get away. He called out her name, and she answered. He leaned forward, his expression serious. He asked her if she would cook this soup for him every day once they grew up. Karen stared back, her eyes wide with surprise. Without hesitation, he declared his intentions with a hand over his heart. He proposed marriage, stating he would happily marry into her family. The proposal left Karen utterly flustered, her face flushing red. Luke's reasoning was simple. Her incredible cooking was the most important thing, and he believed she would continue to feed him even if his own disgusto's family was eventually crushed. She could only stammer out a question, confirming he had just proposed to her. For Luke, that day marked a miraculous encounter. That miraculous encounter set events into motion. Luke immediately contacted his father to make the proposal official, but the Duke, showing no interest, simply told him to do as he pleased. Everything proceeded swiftly, and soon the families arranged to meet. Luke and Syrup arrived to be greeted by Count Caribbean, Karen's father, who welcomed them warmly to his restaurant. Inside the restaurant, the Count gestured for him to take a seat. Luke apologized for his father's absence. The Count waved it off, saying he knew the Duke had just made a brief appearance before leaving. Internally, however, he was incredulous that the head of a high-ranking noble family would not attend his own son's marriage meeting. He listened as the boy spoke, seemingly unbothered by his father's absence. Luke stated plainly that he didn't mind the Duke hadn't come, while Karen wondered if the man's intimidating presence would have been too much for her. He then made his intentions perfectly clear, addressing the Count directly. As the second son, he explained he was free to offer his person and formally asked if it would be acceptable for him to marry into the Caribbean family. The Count's face broke into a wide, delighted grin. He accepted the proposal with enthusiasm, declaring that the Caribbean family would gladly welcome Luke. His boisterous acceptance startled Karen. She looked at Luke, her expression filled with disbelief, and asked if he was truly okay with someone like her. Before Luke could answer, her father cheerfully interjected that Karen had already confessed her love for the boy, causing her to flush with embarrassment. He recalled hearing that she had been the one to confess. However, a different concern occupied his thoughts. He mentioned that he was worried about the rumors that other girls mocked Karen for her appearance. He knew exactly who was responsible. His mind turned to a girl named Iris, only 12 years old, who was known for being cruel to everyone except the pretty girl she favored. He grimaced, realizing she was talking about his own sister. Speaking of Karen's appearance, he considered it more closely. He acknowledged to himself that while she was a little chubby, she was still young and developing. In fact, he found her round face rather cute. He believed she was a good person, but admitted that what truly drew him to her were her cooking skills and her status. Overhearing this, the Count expressed his gratitude that a boy like Luke could see Karen for her inner beauty, though Luke silently corrected that he did. The Count then shifted the conversation to his family's background. He explained that the Caribbeans started as fishermen and traders, and now handle a wide array of maritime businesses. Noting Luke's fair complexion, he expressed concern, mentioning that everyone in their family, himself included, frequently goes to sea and that Luke appears quite weak to the sun. Karen elaborated on her position within the family, explaining that since she has no brothers, she is set to inherit the house. She added cheerfully that if a younger brother were born later, she would happily cede the position to him and use her cooking skills to open her own restaurant. Returning to the Count's earlier concern about the son, Luke offered a confident reassurance. He explained that he trains and is much sturdier than he appears. Furthermore, he stated that his countermeasures against the sun are perfect, revealing his secret weapon, sunscreen. He mused that with his summon, Val, he wouldn't get seasick and could have his luggage carried for him, leaving him to simply sleep. With that decided, he felt it was time to stop imposing on the family. Before he could excuse himself, Count Caribbean spoke, entrusting his daughter to Luke and telling the two of them to enjoy their time together. Luke readily accepted, thanking his new father-in-law. The Count let out a hearty laugh at the title, waving his hand as he walked away and remarking on how hasty the boy was. As her father departed, Karen turned to Luke with sudden intensity. She stammered his name before declaring that she wanted to become pretty enough to stand by his side, leaving him momentarily stunned. He recalled overhearing that she had been concerned with her appearance since she was very young. He told her she was already quite cute, but she quickly insisted that wasn't what she meant. She clarified that she wanted to grow beautiful, her thoughts drifting to Iris, who always seemed to look down on her. Luke offered to help, warning that he was a strict teacher. Prepared, Karen accepted. Her resolve wavered as she asked if it was even possible for someone like her to become beautiful. With a confident smile, he assured her that she could, and that there was a very easy way. The idea of an easy way intrigued her. He briefly considered using his sleep, ability, and Val to help her diet, but quickly understood that simply getting thin was not her true goal. Realizing this wasn't the right time or place, he suggested they go somewhere else. Karen agreed, then asked if they could call each other by their first names, a request he immediately granted. He then summoned Syrup, ordering her to make sure no one was spying on them. With their privacy secured, he told Karen they would continue their talk in his room. He explains to a surprised Karen that his diet method involves magic. He admits that while he might be overreacting, he's concerned about her older sister after what he overheard and wants to get straight to the point. He elaborates that, simply put, it's a way to exercise while sleeping. Karen finds the concept difficult to grasp. He reveals that his attributes are sleep and sloth, a fact that amazes her, and confirms he will be using his sleep attribute for her diet. He continues, stating the process is quite simple. He combines his attributeless magic with his summon, Val the Slime. The plan is to use his sleep magic on her, after which Val will enter her body and perform a set of movements, which her body will copy. Karen, looking at the small slime, finds it adorable. She correctly deduces that Val must be a self-sufficient spell. He confirms her understanding and offers to demonstrate the process on himself first, with Val enveloping his arm. He then instructs Val to perform a light workout, setting a sleep timer for just 1 minute. A minute later, he awakens. Karen is visibly stunned, her hands covering her mouth in shock as she exclaims that his movements were amazing, like those of a martial artist. Wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead, he marvels at the incredible sensation of having exercised without any memory of the effort. He reassures Karen that all she needs to do is allow Val inside her, prompting her to ask if she can truly do it as well. He asks if she's good at exercising, but Karen admits she is not. As Syrup helps her change into more suitable attire, Luke suggests they try it out, and Karen eagerly agrees. Now dressed for activity, she agrees to a light exercise to acclimate her body. Flexing a bicep, she proudly declares that despite being bad at exercise, she is quite strong, a contradiction Luke silently observes. The result is immediate and overwhelming. Karen lies completely exhausted on a chaise lounge, sweating and gasping, questioning if that was truly just a light exercise. Standing over her, Luke calmly asks how she feels, but she can only manage a faint, trailing response. She groaned, her entire body aching to the point of immobility. Luke supported her, explaining that they would begin with basic exercises to build her stamina. He offered to use healing magic, but cautioned that she would still feel some muscle pain. Despite the pain, she agreed with flushed determination, promising to do her best. Luke smiled, encouraging her to persevere. He then moved on to his beauty regimen, instructing her to foam the soap thoroughly. He explained that the foam would absorb the dirt, making harsh scrubbing unnecessary and protecting her skin. Karen absorbed the information, understanding the logic. She followed his instructions, gently applying the foam. The next step, he added, was to rinse her face thoroughly, taking care not to brush against her skin whenever she touched it. With her face clean, it was time for makeup. Karen stared at the collection of bottles, her eyes wide with curiosity. Luke found her quick uptake and brimming enthusiasm made her a satisfying student. The final component of his plan was nutrition. As he lectured, he stressed that a beautiful body cannot be built without the proper nutrients. Karen, now dressed, found the lesson fascinating and praised his cooking ability, certain he could create delicious diet food with the right ingredients. Inspired, she began with simple recipes like soybean dishes and steamed chicken salad. From there, Karen became completely addicted to developing new, healthy meals. She took all of his foundational ideas and, in an instant, transformed them into an impressive spread of unique dishes. The result was a table overflowing with food. While Luke commented that she had made far too much, he was privately thrilled at the chance to enjoy Japanese cuisine, like natto hamburgers and miso soup, in this new world. She looked down, conflicted. Karen acknowledged that overeating, even healthy food, was not good, but she couldn't bring herself to waste it all after being so excited to try making so many different things. Luke calmly suggested a solution. Donate the surplus to one of the nearby orphanages. She beams with inspiration, declaring the idea perfect. She can research cooking while giving anything they can't eat themselves to an orphanage. Putting her plan into motion, she begins making even more dishes, taking turns distributing them to different orphanages every day. Luke observes this, thinking to himself that it's a win-win situation. As they ride in a carriage, he asks if she's going again today. She confirms, admitting that while he gave her the idea, she would much rather be lazing about at home. She continues, revealing another reason for her reluctance. The orphanages are terribly unhygienic, a fact emphasized as she recoils from a rat scurrying across the floorboards. The conditions are squalid, with children gathered near dirty cages. The children, many of them unkempt, flock to her, calling her name. She realizes with dismay that even using clean magic wouldn't be enough for the entire building. And worse, many of the orphans can't use magic to clean themselves. She explains to Luke that the church manages the orphanage, but the priests only appear when money is involved, which is why she feels she can't use her healing magic freely. Her explanation is cut short when a frantic young girl rushes up, pleading for help for her little brother who has fallen and won't wake up. Her dislike for the church leaves her flustered and hesitant. Sensing this, Luke gently cups her cheek, reassuring her that it can't be helped and that he will go check on the boy himself. He finds a boy lying in bed, his breathing shallow and labored. Luke quickly assesses the situation, suspecting pneumonia. He glances around the dilapidated room, recognizing it as no place for a sick person to recover. Leaning over the child, he places a hand over his chest. Focusing his will, he imagines the boy's breathing returning to normal and intones a single word, heal. A soft light emanates from his hand as the boy's strained breaths immediately begin to ease. The boy's sister timidly asks how much the healing will cost. Luke replies simply, nothing. As the now healthy boy sits up, his sister bursts into tears, thanking Luke profusely for his kindness. He turns away, his expression unreadable. He calmly explains that he was merely practicing his magic. As the son of a duke, he assures them he has no need for money. His words leave Karen flustered. She tells him he didn't need to reveal his status, but expresses her gratitude, realizing she now understands how to heal that particular illness. As she thanks him profusely, Luke turns his attention to Syrup, calling her name. He quietly observes that Karen is clever and muses that her life would be much easier if her surroundings were improved. Following her master's unspoken intentions, Syrup stands before the orphanage director. With a confident smile, she proposes that since the Duke has more money than he knows what to do with, it only makes sense to use some of it. The director hesitates, but Luke steps forward, dismissing any need for deliberation. He declares that refusal is not an option and places a heavy pouch containing 50 gold on the desk, instructing the stunned director to use it to improve hygiene and begin educating the children. He reflects on his recent experiences, realizing the orphanages have become a valuable testing ground for his healing magic, allowing him to practice on everything from poison and illness to wounds inflicted by monsters. He admits to himself that although he initially came along without much purpose, he now finds the situation genuinely interesting. Now 14 years old, Luke reflects on the past 3 years since his engagement to Karen. His life has settled into a comfortable rhythm. Syrup, the maid, handles most of his needs. Karen prepares his meals every day, and he has consistently used the slime, Val, to maintain his health and appearance. He feels his ideal, slothful life is steadily improving. He also acknowledges that thanks to Karen, he has experienced many new and different things. However, a somber realization dawns on him. These peaceful days are approaching their end. The reason for this impending change is that Karen is set to attend the academy this spring, which will require her to live in the dormitories. Because of this, he resolves to spend as much of their remaining time together as possible. With this resolution in mind, he notices that Karen is late for their meeting. Believing he knows where to find her, he decides to go look for her himself. As he walks through the main house, he finds it unusual to see his 19-year-old older brother, Testa Hugolo Descustos, at this hour. Testa walks past without a word, completely ignoring him. Luke muses internally that even though he's grown taller than his brother, Testa doesn't seem to care in the slightest. He dismisses the encounter, deciding to put his brother out of his mind and focus solely on finding Karen. He feels certain he knows where she will be. His search leads him to a garden, where he spots her sitting gracefully on a chair amidst a bloom of flowers. He observes her from a distance, noting that her diet has been a great success. She is now widely regarded as a true beauty, lauded for both her appearance and her femininity. His admiration is cut short by a familiar voice calling his name. He turns to see his older sister, Iris, seated at a nearby table. She smiles and asks what brings him there. Before he can answer, she glances towards Karen and asks if he intends to borrow her, questioning if he came to break up their tea party. Luke is stunned to realize Karen had come to see his sister, Iris Hugolo Descustos. He stands before the table and declares he's come to retrieve his kidnapped fiancée. His sister, Iris, glares at him, her expression souring at the interruption. Her power is a subtle one. She knows that any man who meets her eyes typically falls under her spell, becoming a mere plaything. But this time, it has no effect. Karen apologizes to Luke, observing that he seems entirely immune. He confirms this, much to Iris's silent frustration. He reassures Karen that she has nothing to apologize for, then turns his attention back to his sister, asking if her little game is over. He presses his case, arguing that it's unfair for Iris to monopolize Karen's time. Since he won't be attending the academy for another year, he wants to be with her until then. Iris dismisses his plea, telling him to leave them be, as she'll have plenty of time to speak with Karen once they are at the academy together. Caught between the siblings, Karen becomes flustered, privately thrilled at the thought of two beautiful people vying for her attention. Beside her, Iris sulks, her plan clearly not going as expected. Seeing no other way, Luke bows deeply in a gesture of formal apology. He tells his sister that such a scary expression is ruining her beautiful face. He then looks up with a gentle smile, reminding her that she will also be attending the academy soon and encouraging her to do her best. His words seem to have an effect. Karen quickly excuses herself from Iris's company. Luke takes her hand, deciding it's best to leave, privately acknowledging that since he rarely sees his sister, it's wise to stay on her good side. As they depart, Iris is left breathless and flushed. A startling realization dawns on her. Luke is the only man whose beauty can rival her own. A possessive desire surfaces as she whispers his name, admitting to herself that she wants him. A few months pass. With Karen having left for the academy, Luke has stopped going outside. Lying in bed, he idly wonders what book he should have brought to him today. He announces to Syrup that they are going on an outing. She expresses her surprise, noting how rare it is and hoping it doesn't rain. Elsewhere, Malsa Glicko reflects on the situation. Syrup always handled the shopping, and merchants came directly to Luke. He concludes that Luke has no friends to visit other than himself. She continues to remark on how unusual this is. Sitting up on his bed, Luke asks her to accompany him regardless of the weather. With a knowing smile, Syrup agrees to his wish. Their journey begins. A ducal carriage, pulled by two powerful horses, speeds down the road with urgency. Inside the carriage, Luke closes his eyes, reminiscing about how Karen used to take them out. He already misses her. At the reins, Syrup, wearing a cloak to hide her ears and tail, proves to be a skilled driver. Luke announces their arrival. They step out onto the street. Luke remarks on the speed of their travel, noting that no one dares hold up the ducal carriage. With a determined look, he wonders aloud what he will find. Their destination is revealed, the Great Mado Shop. It is a massive department store, one Luke recognizes from a game, known for carrying everything from equipment to gifts for potential romantic partners. As they enter, they are greeted with a warm welcome. Luke turns to Syrup and tells her she can buy whatever she likes. She thanks him gratefully. He is immediately greeted by a well-dressed man who introduces himself as Morsky Mado, the owner. The man correctly identifies him as the young son of Duke Disgustos. Luke internally notes that information is a merchant's greatest weapon. The owner leads them past the main shopping floor and into an opulent VIP room, inviting them to sit down. He is told by the shop owner, Morsky Mado, that dealing with a boring old man must be awful. To make things more interesting, Morsky offers to introduce his daughter to handle their needs, while a nearby attendant assures them they can ask for anything. Following her father's introduction, a vibrant young woman appears. She introduces herself as Akari Mado, Morsky's 14-year-old daughter. Luke immediately recognizes her as one of the game's main love interests, the key to the merchant storyline. Akari greets both Luke and Syrup warmly, expressing her hope that they will get along and noting her pleasure in meeting a beastman. Luke and Syrup formally introduce themselves in return. She then gets down to business, asking what he is looking for today. Internally, Luke marvels at his good fortune, realizing he's managed to meet her even before the academy term begins, something he hadn't imagined possible. He requests that she simply show him anything she would recommend, perhaps a beauty regimen or another convenient item. Delighted by the open-ended request, Akari enthusiastically agrees, promising to show him everything. True to her word, she begins the tour with a smile, her witty commentary accompanying each item. The first object she presents is a magic hairdryer. After some time, Luke emerges from his shopping spree, having purchased nearly everything shown to him. He beams, declaring he got some good things, and thanks Akari for her help. He then turns his attention to Syrup, asking if there is anything she would like for herself. Syrup appears taken aback, replying that there isn't, really. Her hesitation is a mask for her true feelings. She reflects internally that since they so rarely go shopping together, she would be happy to receive a present from him. As if on cue, Akari steps forward and presents a small box, asking what Syrup thinks of the red choker inside. Syrup's eyes widen in astonishment as she gazes at the gift, thinking it's wonderful. She expresses her gratitude, but immediately turns to Luke, protesting that she is merely a servant and cannot accept such a gift. Ignoring her objection, he looks at her with a calm expression and declares that they will take. He then holds the box out for her to take. He explains that it is a token of his gratitude for all the care she provides him, then gently asks if he was mistaken in thinking she liked it. He watches as Syrup, after a moment of hesitation, looks up with a sly, accepting smile. She murmurs that it can't be helped, deciding to accept his gift. She turns her back to him, fastening the choker around her neck. With her face still hidden from his view, she asks for his opinion. As she faces forward again, the red choker is perfectly in place. Akari, watching from the side, exclaims that it suits her very well. Syrup herself, looking pleased, thinks that it's wonderful. She then turns directly to Luke and asks how she looks. He replies, a faint blush on his cheeks, that the choker really emphasizes her beautiful white hair. His compliment brings a radiant, closed-eye smile to Syrup's face. Luke watches her, a gentle smile of his own forming as he thinks to himself how glad he is that she likes it. With their shopping concluded, Akari sees him off at his carriage. She remarks that it was a most satisfying trip and expresses her hope for his continued patronage. As the carriage pulls away, he gazes out the window, musing that doing things like this every once in a while might not be a bad idea. His thoughts drift to the future as the carriage travels through the city. He realizes he will have to leave home for the academy next year and concludes that he needs to experience the world a little before then. Later, back in his room, he decides that before leaving home, he wants to resolve something personal. To face the reason why his original self ended up as the gross, fat toad. Lying in bed, he throws his arms out in frustration. He thinks he has a good guess as to the cause, but what a pain it will be. Still, he resolves that he has to do it, reflecting that the slothful path is a difficult one. A stark contrast illustrates the mystery surrounding Luke Disgustos' physical state. On one side, his current bloated, unhealthy face, surrounded by images of toads and crude implements. On the other, his former sharp, healthy features, framed by elegant perfume bottles. A single thought has long troubled him: the profound change in his face and figure. He gazes at his reflection, wondering how he could have transformed so drastically. He recalls that he started off so well put together, making his current state all the more difficult to comprehend. He questions if a simple hedonistic lifestyle could truly be the cause. He has already investigated the possibility of allergies or a weak constitution, but found no answers. The food ingredients in this world are the same as any other, leaving him at a dead end. Then a new thought strikes him. Perhaps Karen might know something. His mind focuses on the specifics of food preparation and its ingredients. Acting on this idea, he consults with Karen. She provides her testimony, nervously writing down her findings. The ingredients he described, she explains, have properties almost exclusively associated with toxins. Luke considers this, realizing that while toxins can be used medicinally, they can also alter bodily processes or even prove lethal, depending on the method of use. He processes her words, his expression hardening. If toxins are involved, it might finally explain the bizarre change in his appearance. The lead is certainly worth looking into. His investigation leads him to Syrup, whom he asks about his childhood. She recalls that until he was 4, he was a cute child who ate and slept a lot. Aside from his delicate skin, she insists there was nothing physically unusual about him. She continues her account, explaining that his condition grew unstable for about a year after that, only improving around his 6th birthday. She was shocked when he suddenly collapsed during his birthday dinner while he had been enjoying himself. Luke interjects, recalling that he had simply run out of mana and collapsed from exertion. He presses for more detail, asking who prepared his meals back then. Syrup informs him that they had a chef, but he was forced to retire right after that specific dinner. From that point on, the head steward took over all cooking duties. Her words connect the final pieces of the puzzle. With cold certainty, he realizes it all comes together. It must have been the head steward who was making the poison meals. He had found his answer. Entering the room, he greeted the head steward, who sat bound to a chair with his head completely wrapped in bandages. The steward flinched in surprise. He began his interrogation, explaining that he had been doing a lot of thinking. He posed a question to the captive steward. Why did he, Luke, become known as the gross, fat toad? He reasoned that under normal circumstances, he never would have ended up that way, then coldly thanked the man for preparing his food every day. He casually fell back onto a large, soft slime, using it as a cushion. He continued his thought aloud, remarking that his diet, unfortunately, never seemed to agree with him. Leaning in close to the terrified man, he provided the answer himself. It was because someone had been poisoning him. The steward began to sweat profusely, his breath catching in his throat. The steward cried out in a panic, confessing that he was assigned his duties by the head of the Disgustos family. Luke calmly asked if this meant he was acting on his father's orders. He continued his line of reasoning, surmising that his family was unaware he could use healing magic to neutralize the poison. He mused that it must have been difficult for the steward when he not only refused to die, but started getting healthier, concluding that no one cared enough to get their own hands dirty. His eyes narrowed as he made the final, direct accusation, asking the steward if he was the one who poisoned his food. The man could only stammer, unable to form a complete word. The steward immediately broke, bowing his head and begging for forgiveness. Luke watched him, surprised that he had confessed so quickly. He sighed, finding the immediate surrender to be a boring response. He admitted that he would have been more eager for revenge if the steward had put up a fight. He then stated that he would forgive him, but his tone implied a condition. When the steward fearfully asked what he planned to do, Luke clarified that he wouldn't kill him. Instead, the man would become a test subject for his magic. Reaching out his hand, a complex magical seal began to form in the air as he declared it would be a little punishment. He completes the spell, declaring his verdict upon the captive steward, the gift of sloth. The old man is enveloped in a swirling vortex of dark energy, his hands magically bound before him as his consciousness fades. Observing the aftermath, he notes with detached curiosity the effect of his magic on a human subject. The steward's eyes are now vacant, devoid of will. With the steward now placidly seated in a high-backed chair, Luke dismisses him, telling him he can return to his duties. A sense of clarity about his path forward settles over the young master. His thoughts turn to the true architect of the plot, the one he considers his real enemy, his own father, Duke Disgustos. He reasons that his father would be indifferent to the dismissal of mere servants. A direct confrontation, however, would invite unnecessary trouble. Therefore, his strategy is not elimination, but incapacitation. Like pieces on a game board, he will simply render his father's pawns powerless, leaving them on the field but unable to act against them. Sometime later, as he walks through the manor, Syrup approaches him. She asks where he has been, to which he gives a non-committal reply that he was just out. She presses on, stating her assumption that he would be attending the academy and questioning if he had planned otherwise. With a playful glint in his eye, he turns the question back on her, asking if she would be happy to hear that he was, in fact, going. Flustered but pleased, Syrup expresses her desire to remain with him. Luke then explains his hesitation, revealing that attending the academy carries a significant risk of assassination, making avoidance a logical option. He admits his path is set, and since attending would mean separating from her, he had been savoring his remaining time. As his hand gently rests on her head, a serene expression settles on Syrup's face. She comes to a quiet resolution. With the safety of her home now compromised, she has no choice but to take action herself, all to preserve the peaceful, leisurely life she cherishes. A grand strategy formed in Luke's mind. He would operate from the shadows, subtly assisting the story's protagonists. His goal was to orchestrate the inevitable conflict between the royal family and the nobility, ensuring that in the ensuing chaos, his father, Duke Disgustos, would be crushed. He acknowledged that this should be the easiest path to survival, but it didn't change the fact that he was reincarnated as a difficult character. Still, he found a sliver of satisfaction knowing that he was in the world of the game he truly loved. His contemplative expression hardened into one of pure determination. He refused to simply sit back and allow himself to be killed. With newfound resolve, he decided he would fully embrace the role of Luke Disgustos and play it for all it was worth. 1 year later, the day of his departure arrived. As a carriage waited, Syrup bid him farewell, telling him to take care. He confidently reassured her before turning towards the massive, circular grounds of the Alessida's Royal Academy entrance exams. He took in the scene as an instructor announced that the entrance exam would consist of 3 tests: magic, practical skills, and a subject test. He stood amongst the other candidates, recalling that top performers in each subject were granted scholarships, regardless of their identity. With this in mind, he resolved not to try too hard in order to avoid standing out. A girl next to him spoke up, expressing her disdain for a nearby beastman. His attention was drawn to the group heading for the practical exam. Among them was a girl with prominent cat-like ears, who seemed to notice his gaze and flinched slightly. He watched her enter the dueling grounds, a sudden shock of recognition flashing across his face. He knew her instantly. She was Adventurer Ruby, a beastman with green hair and emerald eyes. She was one of the game's heroines. The practical exam began, and Ruby exploded into action, closing the distance in a flash and landing a powerful kick against the burly instructor. She moved with startling speed, her kick connecting with a thunderous crack against the instructor's guard, sending shockwaves through the air. The instructor marveled at the combination of a beastman's powerful constitution and such unorthodox techniques. As Ruby's match concluded, another name was called: Luke Hugolo Disgustos. From the sidelines, Luke noted that things were just getting good. Before he could step forward, another examinee was already being tested. The young man with two-tone hair held a testing slime, which began to glow. The examiner identified his power as elementless magic, and the boy simply sighed, calling it pain. His casual complaint was followed by an immense explosion of raw magical power, shattering the stone floor of the examination hall. The sheer destructive force caused another girl nearby to cry out, telling him that was enough as the next candidate was called. From a distance, Ruby watched the aftermath with a curious hum, a slight, intrigued smile on her face. When the practical exams concluded, the instructor was left defeated on the floor. Luke looked around, wondering where the spirited beastman girl had gone. He spotted her humming to herself as she walked away, figuring he would probably meet her again at school. The following day, Syrup presented Luke with his results. His performance in the game had been excellent, with incredible exam scores, so he had no reason to worry about failing. Now an official student, he walked through the academy grounds in his new uniform. With the protagonist of the game world now a fellow student, Luke stood confidently. The adult romance strategy simulation was about to begin. Dressed in a sharp, new school uniform, Luke Disgustos admires his reflection. He acknowledges to himself that he is now beautiful, a stark contrast to his past self. As he prepares to leave, Syrup informs him that the carriage is ready, her thoughts betraying her awe at his transformation. Today, his new life begins. His destination is the Alessida's Royal Academy, the oldest and most prestigious institution in the kingdom. He knows it to be a stage where all manner of ideas and motives intersect. While nearly all nobles attend, the academy has recently begun accepting the most talented commoners in an effort to recruit more students. This diverse student body is necessary because the kingdom is plagued by dungeons from which monsters constantly emerge. Therefore, learning proper self-defense through battle, magic, and general studies is considered an essential part of their education. Beyond combat, the academy also serves as a research facility with a special focus on magic development. It is a place where one might even have legendary mages as teachers. He recalled the 2 core mechanics of the game this world was based on: raising one's stats and interacting with the love interests. The story and the characters one could meet would change depending on those stats. To aim for a particular route, one had to manage which events or flags were triggered with great care. With these rules in mind, he solidified his strategy. He would play the role of the villain, Luke, who is always near the protagonist. From that position, He would use his knowledge from his previous life to support the hero from the shadows and, most importantly, avoid the normal routes where Luke dies. He knew, however, that his path might already be set to develop very differently from the game. After all, he was no longer the fat, ugly toad he was supposed to be. His resolve hardened. He needed to survive, for the sake of those who cared for him. This resolve was for them. Just before leaving, Syrup had asked if he had remembered everything. He smiled and confirmed that he had, thanking her for preparing it all. But her expression was clouded with worry. Her concern was palpable. She lamented that she wanted to join the academy as his attendant, to clean his dorm for him, but was prevented by a stupid rule. Attendants may not differ in age from their student by more than 2 years. Luke noted internally that her sense of duty had only grown stronger over the years. She listened as Luke held her hands, explaining the academy's rules. While students could have attendance, there was a strict age requirement. Since Syrup was 7 years older than him, she was unfortunately ineligible. He expressed that he would have been happy to have her, but simply couldn't be helped. He acknowledged that it was common for young children to have an attendant of a similar age for this very reason, but admitted he didn't have anyone like that. Her expression filled with worry. She voiced her concern about whether the attendant assigned by the Duke would do a proper job, remarking that Luke always went at his own pace. He tried to reassure her, insisting it would all work out. He smiled, reminding her that he was capable of taking care of himself. He added that Karen was also at the academy, which seemed to offer some comfort. But her resolve did not waver. With a pained and determined look, she stated plainly that she wanted to be the one to take care of him. His gaze softened as he looked at their joined hands. He remembered that Syrup had watched over him ever since he was a small child, and he quietly thanked her. He reflected on his past. His family had never shown him any love or affection, but she had more than made up for that absence. To him, she was his one and only family. She had always been his exclusive attendant, and recently she had been taking on more and more duties. He realized the days ahead would be hard on her without him there. With sudden resolve, he called out her name. He pulled her into a tight embrace, his face buried in her hair. He told her she had done more for him than he could ever repay, but he promised that one day he would reward her. She clung to him, her hands gripping the back of his uniform as he declared with absolute conviction that he would fulfill his promise. He holds Syrup in a final embrace, their farewells heavy with emotion. He tells her he will miss her, and she tearfully reciprocates the sentiment. Pulling back, he instructs her to take care of the house while he is gone. He promises to return by the end of the year and asks her to endure the wait, to which she readily agrees. With their goodbyes exchanged, his horse-drawn carriage departs from the estate. As it travels through the city, he reflects that while they won't be together for a while, this separation only makes him want to treasure Syrup more in the future. He resolves to count the days until his return. He recalls the promise he made just moments before, that when he graduates and leaves the territory, she must come with him. Syrup had been taken aback, admitting she thought she had no future prospects, but he had firmly declared that he would never let her go. Her surprise had given way to resolve. She promised she wouldn't leave his side either, adding the condition that Karen would have to be okay with it. He had smiled, glad to hear her commitment. He then took it a step further, proposing that they become a proper family. The idea caught Syrup off guard, but her shock quickly turned to pure joy as she accepted. Watching her delighted reaction, he thought to himself how cute she was and admitted internally that he loved her. Leaving his home and memories behind, he arrives at the academy. A hooded figure bows, wishing him a nice stay. He waves in acknowledgement as he walks through the grand gates, ready for the next chapter of his life to begin on the academy's main street. Near the door reception area, where he is supposed to meet other new students, a young woman with glasses approaches him. He feels a faint sense of familiarity as she politely asks if she may call him Luke-sama. She apologizes for the late introduction and reveals her name, Libera Glicko. She explains that she is the 15-year-old daughter of Baron Malsa Glicko, the director of the Ministry of Magic, and that she recognized him immediately from her father's description. The connection surprises him. She is Malsan's daughter. Libera clarifies that her father arranged for her to be his attendant and guard, but this new connection changes things. She notes he is the only one to call her father Malsan. As Luke recalls the link between Malsa and Morsky, Libera insists he drop the honorifics and simply call her Libera. He observes his new attendant and asks if she likes magic, mentioning that her father, Malsan, had told him so. Libera's face lights up with pure delight. She declares that she loves it, her ultimate dream being to secure a job at the Ministry of Magic. He asks why that would be an issue, and she explains that people often mock girls who aspire to join ministry. Unfazed, he looks her in the eye and states with firm confidence that he knows she can achieve her goal. He continues his encouragement, adding that she is talented and works hard at magic, so she will surely do well. Visibly moved by his unexpected support, Libera beams, her eyes closing in a happy smile as she offers a heartfelt thank you. Her gratitude quickly turns into eager resolve as she declares her desire to get closer to him. When he questions this, she clarifies that as his attendant, she wants to take care of him. Luke dismisses the need, stating he can manage on his own, all the while wondering why she seems to like him so much. Her expression shifts to one of intense focus. Peering at him from behind her hand, she declares that his magic is an art form, a profound realization dawning on her. He suddenly recalls what he knows of her from the game's world. Libera is a magic maniac. Her obsessive love for magic often goes too far, causing trouble and earning her the title of witch. She was a character that could only be encountered by raising one's magic statistic. Realizing this, he decides it's best to change the subject. He suggests they finish the dorm application first and discuss magic later, but Libera waves it off, stating that the paperwork is already done. Her forwardness makes him wonder if she's a bit too gung-ho. She then proposes they find a place that serves tea to have their discussion. Now seated at a cafe, Luke inhales the fragrant steam from his cup and agrees, noting that this particular tea is the most suitable for a conversation about magic. With his permission, she asks to jump straight into her personal opinion on his original spell. As he sips his tea, he thanks her for always sending the delicious blend and tells her to proceed. She launches into her analysis, beginning with the practical applications of attributeless magic. Her excitement quickly builds, her hands gesturing emphatically as she repeats the phrase, attributeless magic, with reverence. Watching her, Luke silently questions if her profound interest is a result of Tomo-san's influence. He listened as Libera concluded her assessment, her eyes sparkling with academic fervor. In short, she felt that Val's potential uses were limitless. Though she was already knowledgeable on the subject, she believed there was still significant room for improvement. He sipped his drink, reflecting that Libera would make an excellent research partner. Her enthusiasm was infectious, mirroring that of her father. She declared that she was looking forward to seeing what he would come up with. Their lively discussion continued at an outdoor table, the two of them engrossed in their shared passion for magic. After some time, she noted that it was almost time for the day's main event and suggested they get moving. They rose from their seats and headed towards their destination. They arrived at the Magic Academy's Great Hall, a vast auditorium already filled with students for the entrance ceremony. As he surveyed the crowd from a balcony, he began to recognize faces from the game. All the key players were gathered in one place. His observation was cut short by a sudden, startling sensation that washed over him. An intense, hostile presence emanated from the crowd below, originating from a single point, the Sword Emperor. The young man's gaze shot upwards, locking directly onto Luke's position. A faint smile touched his lips as a thought formed in his mind. I see. He stared back, a sense of unease washing over him as he wondered if he had been noticed. The Sword Emperor's look was confrontational, and he felt a bad premonition settle over him. As the Sword Emperor's stare bores into him, Luke meets it with a steady gaze of his own. He reflects internally that this should be the first time they have ever met, but the other boy's intense focus suggests a prior connection. Inside a grand hall, Libera Glico asks Luke Disgustos what's the matter. He wonders aloud why a particular student is staring at him, as if he were an archenemy. Libera identifies the boy as Dan, a knight apprentice. Luke grimaces, recalling that the martial family leads the rival noble faction, making them enemies from birth. Libera adds that she's heard Dan is highly accomplished in martial arts. She internally recalls more details from the game's lore. Dan's appraisal is growth, while Lishan of House Martials is attribute energy. Libera remembers that Lishan is the protagonist's childhood friend and a potential marriage candidate on the standard knight route. She is a devoted heroine whose love for the protagonist makes her endearing. Her thoughts continue, exploring another possibility, a route where Luke captures Lishan, turning her into his wife and an enemy to be fought. Libera considers that fight a highlight, musing that Lishan's pure, devoted personality ultimately becomes her downfall. She also recalls that Dan, a commoner, was able to enter the academy as Lishan's attendant because his late father was an honorable knight. Because of this history, Dan aims to carry on his father's legacy and become a knight for House Martial, fueling his hatred for the Disgustos family. Luke observes Dan's intense gaze and sighs internally, thinking it's a pain that the boy will likely come after him. His attention then shifts as the valedictorian speech is announced, and a girl named Irina Shildy Bordalesidas is called to the stage. Irina is introduced as the first princess of the kingdom. Luke notes she's the freshman representative, while Libera complains about how boring school life is. When Luke asks if she's interested in the princess, Libera dismisses the idea. She admits Irina is beautiful, but explains that thanks to her sister, Iris, she's accustomed to beautiful people and wasn't interested in Irina in the game, either. He tells her that, most importantly, he already has a fiancée he loves. With two people he must be wary of, he can't let his guard down. He then asks Libera if she'd mind if he took a nap, pulling out a large, fluffy pillow. He suggests they can discuss things later. Libera smiles, agreeing that it sounds great. As the ceremony continues, Luke is sound asleep on his pillow. Libera watches him fondly. After some time passes, she gently wakes him, informing him that the ceremony is over and all the other students have left. She curiously identifies his pillow as the rumored one. He confirms it's the one, explaining with a smile that his father told him he was floating on it when they first met. Calling Libera a beautiful girl, he offers to let her ride it sometime, claiming it feels wonderful. She thanks him, saying she appreciates people who are honest about their interests. Her mood then sours as she clenches her fists, lamenting that they have orientation next. Saying they should get moving, Luke suddenly takes her hand. Libera is completely taken aback, stammering that she's never held hand with a boy before. Luke simply tells her it's fine. Blushing, she notes how soft his hand is. He smirks, declaring that he must take responsibility for stealing a maiden's first time and offers to escort her to their classroom. As they walk off hand in hand, Lishan Marshall watches them from a distance, her expression hardening with anger. She trembles slightly, muttering the word coward. Startled by the accusation, Libera whirls around and shouts that they aren't doing anything, while Luke calmly tries to placate her. Libera asks Luke if he's angry about the earlier confrontation, but he dismisses the thought. He explains there's no point in wasting energy on it when he would much rather spend that energy talking with her. Visibly delighted, Libera agrees that she also enjoys their conversations. He resolves to get the orientation over with quickly as they enter a vast lecture hall designated Class 0. Libera notes that everyone seems to be present and that they are free to choose their seats. From the front of the room, a man with long dark hair introduces himself as their teacher, Glorn Research. Luke immediately recognizes him from the game. Then, the assistant teacher, a woman named Silas, is introduced. Luke internally notes that she's an elf, hundreds of years old, and the most difficult love interest to pursue in the game's story. Another student, a commoner on scholarship named Muriel, explains to the class that status does not matter at the academy. They will be judged solely on their abilities. Hearing this, Lishan Marshall raises her hand and asks how, exactly, they are meant to determine their rank and capabilities. The teacher thanks her for the excellent question. In response, Glorn dramatically unveils a brand new invention, the Magic Watch. He instructs the students to channel their mana through the device. As Luke does so, his watch emits a bright flash of light. The teacher explains that this invention records their unique mana signature and allows them to check their grades and rank. Looking at the display, Luke recognizes it as the stat screen from the game, showing his name, age, level, and class. He realizes that while the detailed stats are private, the overall rankings are public information for the faculty. He pulls up the rankings from the previous year, noting that Arena was ranked first overall, while Ruby held the top spot for practical skills. Continuing his review, he sees that Libera is ranked first in Magic and Muriel is first in Studies. He himself is ranked second. Glorin, noticing his focus, asks for his opinion, proudly declaring that magic tools are the greatest resource for advancing humanity. Luke turns to ask Libera about her grades, but she seems distracted, calling their teacher a magic maniac and muttering that he hasn't realized they are the same. As the classroom buzzes with activity, Silas steps forward, announcing that cool time is over and she will now explain academy life. She addresses the students, stating that their growth is their own responsibility and that ranks are not merely for show. She delivers a stern warning. If their grades drop, they will be mercilessly demoted to a lower class. However, she concludes by adding that there is one exception. She reveals the one exception, the Sword Emperor Cup. The assistant teacher explains that even if a student's magic and academic grades are low, a strong performance in this prestigious tournament will allow them to remain in the higher classes. It is the Academy's greatest event, held annually and attracting major attention from across the world. She elaborates on the rewards for victory, which include becoming an honorary knight and rising in the ranks to nobility, a status that comes with significant privileges. As part of the school system surrounding the cup, practice matches are permitted. These are known as ranking battles. As she summarizes the rules for these battles, Luke listens, recognizing the system. Lower-ranked students can challenge those of higher rank, and the challenged are not allowed to refuse. A victor steals the opponent's rank and is transferred to the corresponding class. A loser, however, cannot challenge the same person again for 6 months, and after 5 losses to the same opponent, they are barred from ever challenging them again. He realizes with certainty that these rules are set up exactly as they were in the game, designed to force a confrontation between him, the villain, and Dan, the protagonist. Luke's prescribed role is to be the first one defeated in a ranking battle, a necessary event to establish their fated rivalry. While Luke contemplates this, Dan reaffirms his own goal, to win the cup and become an honorary knight. His resolve firm, Dan raises his hand and asks when the ranking battles can begin. Silas informs him they can start as soon as they register on their watches. Without a moment's hesitation, Dan declares his intent to challenge someone immediately. He rises from his seat, points a finger across the room, and bellows his challenge. Luke Hugolo Disgustos. Fight me. The challenge instantly appears on Luke's watch, officially starting the duel. From his seat, the game's protagonist observes, identifying this as the tutorial battle. Luke, facing his opponent, grimly accepts his part, acknowledging that this is the first task set for the villainous noble. The confrontation mirrors the pivotal tutorial fight from the game. In that original story, Luke, despite being enrolled for his exceptional talent in magic, was defeated by Dan, a knight apprentice. This loss ignited a burning desire for revenge in the original Luke, causing him to relentlessly target Dan afterward. While the original Luke was left to grind his teeth in the background, consumed by his grudge, Dan was able to live a fulfilling academy life, earning the affection and friendship of those around him. He recalls this original plot, where the proud noble flew into a frenzy after being challenged by a mere commoner. But this Luke is different. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he flatly declares he will not be doing that. His refusal surprises Dan. Looking utterly bored from his seat, Luke states that he is rank 2 and asks what Dan's rank is. Dan misinterprets this disinterest as cowardice, shouting back, accusing him of being scared. He calmly dismisses the accusation, explaining that he doesn't want to fight an idiot who can't understand a simple situation. He points out that while Dan has an opportunity to raise his ranking, he himself has nothing to gain. In response, Dan bellows that his rank is 20. Nearby, Lishan martial fumes, declaring she can't stand for this. She storms forward to confront Luke directly. She demands to know why he won't fight, shouting that as a noble of their glorious country, accepting a challenge should be a matter of fact for him. Her fiery lecture seems to short-circuit as she reconsiders. She mutters that she knows he's a troublesome hothead, but his grades are good. With a flustered look, she suddenly backs down, deciding she'll pass on getting involved. She turns and walks away, dismissing the whole affair as too troublesome. As she departs, Luke internally reaffirms his creed. Direct involvement goes against his principle of laziness. He only wants the help from behind the scenes. Just then, a new voice cuts in. Irina Alesides steps forward, expressing a genuine desire to see a fight between the two of them. She highlights the compelling matchup. Dan, with his excellent practical score, versus Disgustos, with his excellent magic score. Her gaze fixes on Luke. She calmly informs him that refusing the duel will only cause his rank to fall. More pointedly, she invokes his status, stating that a noble of the country should guide the people, and firmly requests that he follow the Academy's rules. He finds the princess's insistence incredibly annoying. She stands before him, adamant, declaring that it is his duty and that she will not permit him to refuse the duel. She presses on, reminding him of their teacher's words, that at the Academy, status is irrelevant, and only one's grades hold any weight. Her logic leaves him cornered. He sighs in frustration, realizing the difficulty of refusing both a princess and a duke's daughter. Internally, he admits his intense dislike for Princess Irina as Libera Glicko watches with concern. With a heavy sense of resignation, he finally concedes. "You're right, princess." His words reach Dan, who observes from a distance alongside Lishan Marshall. Dan reflects internally that Luke appears too weak to resist the predetermined flow of events by himself. Resigned to his fate, Luke walks through the Academy grounds, the Grand Colosseum looming nearby. The slime, Val, floats beside him as he laments that he has no choice, but complains that it's a pain and he'd rather not move so much. As he walks with Libera and Dan, he contemplates his next move. To properly fulfill his role, he knows he must lose the duel, but he's unsure how to accomplish it. Val, sensing his unease, floats near and asks if he is all right. Libera turns to him, mentioning she's heard he dislikes exercise. She then offers what she knows about his opponent, explaining that Dan is a knight apprentice from the Marshall Ducal House, a family of renowned fighters, and that his exam results suggest he is quite accustomed to combat. He responds to her information with a sudden, confident smile. Turning to Val, he reassures the slime that everything is fine, declaring that this will be a piece of cake for him. His sudden and complete change in demeanor catches Libera by surprise. Her eyes widen behind her glasses, sparkling with a newfound admiration for his unexpected confidence. She remarked that Luke was truly a mysterious person, having invented magic no one else had ever conceived of, yet refusing to fight despite his noble status. Luke simply listened, asking if that was so. She quickly assured him she meant it as a compliment. When Luke questioned what inventing magic and refusing to fight had to do with each other, she explained that nobles place a great deal of value on their pride. He smiled, replying that if that was the case, then it was fine. He added that he wouldn't want Libera to dislike him, a comment that left her completely stunned. Her composure shattered, and she vehemently denied the possibility, shouting that she would never dislike him. As they walked, their opponents, Dan and Lishan Marshall, strode ahead with grim determination, their gazes fixed forward. Their path led them to a grand coliseum known as the arena. Luke remarked that he hadn't set foot in the place since the entrance exam. Inside, a proctor walked onto the sand, observing that their classmates had gathered in the stands to witness the first ranking match. As Luke watched impassively, Dan began to stretch, preparing for battle. He turned to Luke, declaring his intent to beat his rotten personality into shape. Dan accused him of lazing about during the exam, but Luke simply told a worried Libera to wait for him, unfazed by the threat. His opponent's anger was met with a dismissive sigh. Luke told Dan not to ignore him and to just be grateful that he was even willing to fight. The taunt worked. Dan demanded to know Luke's level, defining it as the number that increases when one defeats monsters. Luke casually replied that since it was a game, he had maxed it out when he first saw it, and hadn't worried about it since, as strategy and basics were far more important. He calmly faced his opponent, Dan, who could only stare in confusion. When Luke clarified that his level was merely 1, Dan's eyes widened in disbelief. His disbelief quickly turned to outrage. Clenching his fist, he yelled that Luke was even worse than he'd imagined, questioning how a noble could have never fought a monster before. Ignoring the outburst, the dual proctor's voice echoed across the arena. He formally introduced Challenger Dan and the defender of the higher rank, Luke Hugelo Disgustos, before ordering them to step forward. In response, Dan gripped his sword with both hands, his gaze locked on his opponent with fierce determination. Luke, by contrast, appeared completely unbothered, nonchalantly wishing him a good fight. His face flushed with concentration as he awaited the signal to start the ranking match. As the proctor roared for the match to begin, Dan instantly charged. Luke, however, simply summoned Val, his slime companion. He mused internally that in the game, he had been the one attacking with selected commands, but this reality offered no such guidance. He concluded he had only one option. With Dan's blade descending upon him, he gave Val a simple command: take full control for 1 minute. He added a request for the slime to keep them both from serious harm. figuring he could just surrender after he regained consciousness. The slime instantly morphed, forming a blade that parried Dan's strike with a sharp clang. Dan stared in shock as Luke, his eyes now glowing with a different light, spoke with Val's intent. "I'm counting on you." His opponent was left bewildered, gripping his sword defensively. The figure of Luke, now guided by Val, loomed with a confident, unsettling smile. A moment later, Luke blinked, groaning as he came to his senses. He looked down at his hand, confused by the strange substance covering it. Before him, Dan's form was dissolving into nothingness. The duel he had just awoken from had begun with a strange, disarming touch. As swords clashed below, the body of Luke Disgustos, controlled by another, had simply reached out and placed a hand on Dan's forehead. Dan, caught off guard, demanded to be released. With a determined expression, the being controlling Luke clenched its fist. In the distance, the duel raged on, the clang of steel echoing across the arena. Dan, however, was sweating, his thoughts racing. He noted that, just as he was ordered, his opponent wasn't badly hurt. He believed that no matter what happened, Luke would eventually use his secret attribute magic to win, making it impossible for Dan to lose this arranged match. His opponent, however, had other plans, lunging forward with a declaration. "Let's just end this." He moved with unnatural speed, once again touching Dan's forehead and uttering a single command. "Sleep." Dan attempted to counter, tightening his muscles and activating his boost ability, but it was far too late. The boy's thoughts were cold and analytical. He recognized Dan's attribute magic boost as a cheat ability that supercharged his strengthening magic. However, he also noted that, due to Dan's inexperience, it wasn't particularly effective yet. He continued his assessment, concluding that since Dan's magic tolerance was low, he couldn't resist the sleep spell. A strange thought crossed his mind. While he hadn't fulfilled his role of losing, it would be bad for him, the villain, to win. Dan struggled against the encroaching magic, his body refusing to obey. He realized he had to find a way to trick them, to somehow salvage the situation as the crowd watched on. His desperate struggle was not lost on the spectators. Lishan Marshall cried out in alarm, questioning what was happening. The proctor stared, aghast, as a massive white blob erupted from Luke, engulfing Dan and lifting him into the air. The proctor's voice cut through the arena's stunned silence, declaring Luke the winner. He pleaded with him to stop, to just let Dan down from his gelatinous prison. The proctor's declaration hangs in the air as Dan's body thuds against the stone floor. Lishan Marshall watches in disbelief, her eyes wide with shock as she cries out his name. Her shock quickly turns to fury. Kneeling beside her fallen comrade, she glares up at Luke and screams, calling him scum. She demands to know where his noble pride is, accusing him of disparaging the winner when Dan was already unconscious. He remains unfazed by her outburst. With a cold, level gaze, he states that he never wanted to fight in the first place. Dan forced the issue. Therefore, he concludes, Dan should have been prepared for this outcome. His gaze then lifts from Dan and Lishan, sweeping across the silent onlookers in the stands. He addresses everyone, declaring that he will now accept any challenge to a ranking match. The audacious challenge leaves Lishan momentarily stunned. He then raises a hand to his forehead, putting on a show of weariness. He suggests that since he must be exhausted now, it presents a fine opportunity for any would-be challengers. He scans the crowd, asking if anyone will take the deal. Silence is his only answer. Seeing no one step forward, he smirks, deciding that while he has their attention, he will teach them all an important lesson. From her seat, Libera Glicko observes the scene with a thoughtful, serious expression. He begins his lesson, stating that he respects the intelligent and those who dedicate themselves to the pursuit of magic. He then adds that he detests fools who rely on nothing but brute force. His hand gestures dismissively toward Dan's unconscious form on the ground. He declares that if any other barbarian like this one dares to challenge him, he will make absolutely certain they can never challenge him again. His fist clenches, a silent, violent promise underscoring his threat. In the stands, Irina, Alessidas, and the other students look on, their expressions a mix of apprehension and fascination. Luke Disgustos stands over his defeated opponents, Dan and Lishan. He muses that his villainous reputation will now surely spread throughout the class. While he would prefer no one else challenge him, he accepts that this kind of injustice is simply the way of the world. His thoughts are interrupted by Lishan Marshall, who clenches her fist in fury. She vows to defeat Dan and tells him to remember her words. As she storms off, Luke, standing beside Libera Glicko, quietly asks what that was about, wondering if he should have kept his thoughts to himself. As Dan plummets toward the stone floor, Val the Slime surges forward to cushion his fall. Luke covers his mouth, chiding himself for his own laziness in not intervening sooner. He then addresses the fallen Dan, stating that it's a waste of effort to study magic if one is so easily swayed by emotion. Luke declares that any further explanation is useless, dismissing Dan as a fool who only understands his own brand of justice, and concludes that he has said enough. Libera agrees with him, asking if he is ready to leave. He remains silent, his expression turning somber and distant. His contemplation is broken by the arrival of Princess Irina Alessidas. She addresses him, confirming that he is indeed Luke and her classmate. He acknowledges his identity and asks what she wants. She remarks that he is the only one who looks at her with such an expression. Internally, she notes that their compatibility is terrible, believing that as a commoner, he he could never understand her. She then recalls hearing about him from her older brother, Testa, realizing they are in the same grade. Her expression softens slightly as she formally acknowledges that he is from the Disgustos family. She thanks him for the wonderful fight he displayed. With that, she turns to leave, stating that was all she came to say. As she departs, Libera asks what that was about. Luke looks down, a single tear falling as he murmurs that he cannot be forgiven. Libera smiles brightly, telling him not to worry about whatever he's talking about. She cheerfully remarks that their first day of school was certainly tiring. He found Karen on a balcony overlooking the estate at night, asking what she was doing out there. He suggested she take a short rest. She turned to him with a bright smile, the table beside her cleared of food. She expressed her delight, saying it had been a long time since she'd tasted his cooking and that she was completely full. She added that she was glad he was well and had put her all into preparing the meal for him. He seemed moved by her words. She continued, stating that her cooking was the best thing to give him energy, but playfully warned him not to praise her too much, lest she get carried away. He smiled, assuring her it was fine if she did, given her many successful business ventures. She credited him for it all, but he humbly corrected her, stating he had only offered a little advice. She looked at him, wide-eyed, insisting that his support was the very foundation of House Caribbean's success. She questioned if he was simply trying to praise her, finding his modesty almost problematic. He simply replied that it was fine by him, explaining that as wealth accumulates for House Caribbean, he too would be enriched. She laughed, remarking that only a nobleman would make such a statement. Her playful demeanor shifted. Taking his hand, she asked if he was being serious. He confirmed that he was, their clasped hand a reminder of the many conversations they had shared over the years. Leaning closer, she spoke with intensity. She recounted how his family was indifferent to him, how he strived for a healthy life, and how he was enamored with her cooking. She acknowledged that despite knowing everything about her, he gave her unwavering love. With a hint of vulnerability, she then asked, "Hey, Luke, am I still just your cook?" In response, he knelt before her. He called her the girl from before his engagement, declaring that even if both the ducal house and the count's house were to fall, she was more important to him than anything. He confessed that he could not live without her. He extended his hand, asking her to stay by his side for the night. A bright, surprised smile spread across her face, and she playfully called him a wicked man, noting that no woman could refuse such a heartfelt plea. By the next morning, he carries Karen through the air, leaping across rooftops under the early dawn sky. He tells her that if anyone besides Syrup were to see them like this, he would do his utmost to remain unseen. As he lands atop a stone parapet, his presence catches the eye of Dan, who is out for an early morning run. The night apprentice is startled to see anyone else out, let alone a member of the Disgustos family, and wonders what he could possibly be doing at this hour. His surprise turns to suspicion as he wonders if the young noble is plotting something sinister. His eyes widen as Luke becomes enveloped in a shimmering, ethereal aura, a technique he recognizes as Trace. The aura reveals a vision of Luke in combat, moving with breathtaking grace against multiple opponents. Dan is stunned by the beauty of the display, noting that the seamless, fluid movements are less like a fight and more like a masterfully choreographed dance. Luke, however, recalls the fight from a different perspective. He had initially underestimated his opponent, believing their lower level meant an easy victory. He came to understand that physical ability isn't solely tied to level. His adversary's other stats were abnormally high, forcing him to find a way to overcome the vast difference in their power. The revelation of Luke's true strength hits Dan hard. He clenches his fist in frustration, realizing that the boy he had dismissed as a pampered noble brat was, in fact, training with an intensity that surpassed his own. The truth of it stings more than any physical blow. He reflects on his own path, how he has trained relentlessly, thinking only of combat to become a knight worthy of the martial name. He believed that was all that mattered. Now, he understands that his current path will never be enough to reach Luke's level, leaving him to wonder what crucial element he lacks. Looking up at the vast, empty sky, he comes to a humbling conclusion. The world is far larger and more complex than he ever imagined. As dawn breaks over the silent ramparts, he resolves to think more for himself, to find his own way forward. With renewed determination, he resumes his run. He identifies his greatest weakness, his failure to use his intellect. While his physical strength is undoubtedly a product of the martial style, he admits he has neglected his studies, lacking the structured environment of the academy. Despite this, he is resolved to change. He shouted with renewed vigor, declaring his desire to defeat Luke. This, he proclaimed, would be interesting. Luke, observing him, covered his mouth. He couldn't see any vision of Dan actually winning, but the boy's spirit was undeniable. The knight apprentice grinned through his bandages, dismissing his defeat as a single setback. He vowed that one day, he would absolutely surpass Luke. With that, he turned and ran, acknowledging to himself that for now, Luke was too far ahead to even catch a glimpse of. As Dan departed, Luke stood alone, a warm, healing light emanating from his chest. Later, in the Academy's grand dining hall, Luke and Libera prepared to get their breakfast. Iris was already seated, sipping her morning honey tea. She greeted them both warmly. She admonished Luke, telling him he needed to eat a proper meal. As she took another sip of her tea, she mused internally on the strange contradiction of his carefree attitude despite his low blood pressure. As he stood before her, Iris continued, explaining that coming to the academy had revealed a new side of her older sister. She had apparently become a considerate person, whose gentle posture and way of speaking with the upper nobility were so praised that some even called her divine. She had been the center of attention at the welcome party for new students. Luke recalled the event. He had also given a speech as the freshman representative, but rumors of his association with the royalist faction had spread so quickly that he'd lost interest in the proceedings. Libera suddenly interjected, apologizing to Iris-sama and noting that her sister drinks quite a lot. Luke looked surprised by the revelation. Libera then enthusiastically suggested that they should develop a supplement to help with low blood pressure. As they conversed, a stern-looking student walked past them. The encounter reminded Luke that his first battle at the academy had already become a widely known, sensational incident. This incident had clearly defined the political lines within the student body. The royalist faction, to which Luke now belonged, was met with jealousy and animosity. In contrast, the aristocratic faction regarded them with respect and awe. Meanwhile, the neutral faction and the commoners simply watched with interest, uncertain how to interact with the unfolding power dynamics. He sat back in his chair, relieved. The stunning effect of his duel had finally worn off, and he felt that for a while, at least, he wouldn't be bothered. Now, he could finally focus on his studies. His thoughts turned to the academy's curriculum. He learned that classes were divided into two types: compulsory subjects covering basic knowledge, and elective subjects for magic and practical skills. The first order of business was course registration. A wide grin spread across his face. He mused that while in a game, classes had specific roles for raising stats that didn't apply to him here. He was free to combine his favorite subjects however he wished. He decided immediately to avoid practical skills entirely. Since he was already strong enough, he would focus solely on magic. After all, he reasoned, a deep knowledge of magic was indispensable for pursuing a life of leisure. Just then, Libera announced that she had made her decision, choosing magic studies and magical tool studies, filling the rest with basic courses. With no more classes for the day, she suggested they depart. As they walked up a grand staircase, she cheerfully proposed they go to an individual training room. She explained it was a private space where one could study or practice magic and other skills. She continued, detailing the academy's system. Access to facilities like the arena, classrooms, and training halls was restricted by class rank. However, Class 0 was granted priority access to all of them, ensuring its students had the best possible environment. Walking down a long corridor, she added that student rankings were made public to foster a sense of competition. With a determined look, she gestured toward a set of doors, announcing, "This is it." The doors opened into a cavernous, empty hall. Libera apologized for its vastness, promising to add something to it. In the center of the immense room, Karen C. Caribbean knelt on the floor. Suddenly, a powerful force erupted from her, shattering the stone floor beneath her knees. Cracks radiated outwards as the ground gave way under the immense pressure. Her power had left the training room in a state of utter devastation. Debris hung in the air, and the walls were scarred with the force of her magic. In the wake of this destruction, Libera clapped her hands together, announcing with a flourish that she had restored the expanded space. Luke looked on astonished. He asked if this was her first time using such magic. Libera confirmed it was, noting that since it wasn't a spell found in books, it was quite rare for someone like her who had only practiced magic at home. With a confident smile, Luke offered to teach her various things, an offer she readily accepted. She then gestured to a glowing formation on the floor, explaining that it was a magic circle. Though a common item, she elaborated that it was necessary to stabilize magic and that one needed training to draw the diagrams correctly, otherwise the spell would fail to activate. He took a moment to reflect, holding Val the Slime in his hand. He mused that while magic is convenient, it requires a corresponding amount of effort. Non-elemental magic is easy to use if one is accustomed to it, but becomes difficult without imagination. In contrast, elemental magic is simpler to use at first, but requires deep understanding and training for any practical application. Her eyes lit up at his analysis. She declared that he must enjoy it as well, finding the subject deep and interesting. He enthusiastically agreed. With the theoretical discussion concluded, they sat at a desk. Libera suggested they get down to business, starting by writing down their personal information. He reviewed the document she prepared. It listed her as Libera Glicko, level 4, with an elemental attribute of water and acquired skills in non-elemental life enhancement and support magic. Luke remarked that water magic seemed well suited for her. She agreed, noting its versatility in both offense and support made it fun to experiment with. He then slid his own paper across the desk, declaring that this was his magic. Libera leaned forward, saying she had been waiting for this moment. He encouraged her to have high expectations, confident she could find many applications for it. She took the document, but as she read, her expression shifted to one of wide-eyed shock. "Is this all right?" she stammered. He calmly replied that this particular elemental magic must be kept secret and that she should only tell others he uses magic that affects the human body. Still processing the revelation, she listened as Luke leaned forward with a sly smile. He asked her to keep his secret, reassuring her that it was fine since Mal-san already knew and hadn't spoken of it. She readily agreed, giving her word not to speak of it to anyone else. Val, the slime, chimed in with its own enthusiastic promise of secrecy. Her mind raced back to the duel. She now understood that the magic Luke used to instantly incapacitate Dan was a form of sleep magic. It was the first time she had ever witnessed hypnosis magic in action. He, on the other hand, was lost in his own thoughts, eagerly anticipating how his unique abilities would be put to use. He mused that he was looking forward to it as well. Her attention then shifted to another matter. She expressed her curiosity about his non-elemental magic, specifically concerning Val, noting that since original magic isn't registered, it cannot be analyzed. He wondered aloud if the appraisal skill simply referenced the database from the Ministry of Magic. She confirmed his suspicion, explaining that for the elemental magic inspection, the appraisal function must be equipped with a highly advanced analysis feature. With a flourish, she presented a magic watch. She explained that while concentrating advanced functions into such a small device is technically challenging, the low mana values involved make it possible. She noted it was a rare item, and Luke's eyes lit up with anticipation for its future potential in dungeon crawling and information gathering.